Welcome to 6 of the most devastating losses to literature. From a Greek comedy you've never heard of, to Hemingway's first novel, to the loss of an entire civilization's knowledge. These are books that would surely be classics, books that might even change our understanding of history, but they can't. They won't. Because they're gone. From awful, to tragic, to straight up devastating. Starting off with Ernest Hemingway. We know Hemingway for his straightforward writing, which had a major influence on 20th century authors, and sealed his place among American literary icons. He wrote The Sun Also Rises, Farewell to Arms, The Old Man and the Sea, but in 1922, he hadn't written any of that yet. In fact, he wasn't even published yet. He was looking for his big break, and he thought that he found it. He met an editor in Switzerland who wanted to take a look at his work. His wife Hadley was back home in Paris, so he told her to bring up his writing. And she did. She packed up everything. Originals, carbon copies, letters, all of it went into a suitcase. Then she lost it. She stepped away from it for a moment at the train station and poof, someone stole it. All of Hemingway's writing up to that point, gone. There were a bunch of short stories, but perhaps the worst thing of it all was that his first novel was in that suitcase. And this was a World War I novel about his experiences in the war. And now, no one will ever see it. He never tried to rewrite any of it, but I'm not entirely sure he ever got over it either. He claimed he would have opted for surgery if it would remove the memory of the loss. Even worse than that, sometimes he got drunk and he joked that this incident was the entire reason that he divorced Hadley. Now, there's an argument to be made that without the loss of this early writing, we never would have gotten The Sun Also Rises. So when compared to other things on the list, this only hits a 6 out of 10 on the devastation scale. But what happened to Sylvia Plath's unpublished work is so much worse. You probably know Sylvia Plath as the author of confessional, depressing poetry, and she was that. But she was so much more. She was one of the most influential poets of the 20th century, bringing attention to the treatment of women as well as the treatment of psychiatric patients. Her novel, The Bell Jar, combined real-life experiences with fictional ones, and her real-life experiences were dark. She had experienced electroshock therapy, attempted suicide, and she had spent 6 months in a psychiatric hospital. But The Bell Jar so accurately depicts depression that it still resonates with people today, 50 years later. Unfortunately, this was the only novel that Plath wrote before she took her own life at just 30. Or was it? It turns out that she was working on another novel, Double Exposure, of which she had 130 pages written. Just like with The Bell Jar, Double Exposure was going to use her real-life experiences as a base. In real life, Plath was going through a rough time. She was separated from her husband because he was cheating on her. Double Exposure, therefore, involved a husband, a wife, and a mistress. So what happened to it? Her ex-husband happened. When she died, since she and Ted Hughes were separated but not divorced, he got control over all of her unpublished work. And between her death in 1963 and 1970, Double Exposure disappeared and has never been seen again. Later, Ted Hughes claimed that her mom probably took the novel, and there weren't actually 130 pages, there were only like 70. We will likely never know what happened to that novel. 7 out of 10. But imagine that a meteor strikes the Earth, and you lose 96% of recorded knowledge. That's basically what happened in China when they lost the Yongle. The Yongle Dadian or Yongle Encyclopedia was created in 1403, and it was meant to record all knowledge in China. Everything they knew and had written at that time was in those books. Important works of literature were copied into it, everything on Confucianism, philosophy, the arts and sciences. It was extensive. I mean, it took 5 years to complete with over 2,000 scholars working on it, handwriting, everything. When it was finished, they had created 11,095 volumes, making it the world's largest encyclopedia. This was a title that they held until it was overtaken in 2007 by Wikipedia. Only 2 copies were made, and both of them were mostly burned or looted during the Second Opium War. So now there are fewer than 400 of the 11,095 volumes left. All recorded knowledge in China gone? That's an 8 out of 10. Now we need to talk about the Elizabethan era. This era was a bit of a black hole for writing. There were a ton of plays written, around 3,000, but most of them were performed but never written down. So only 543 remain, which is less than 20%, and the most famous playwright of this time was William Shakespeare, who is also the subject of our next devastating loss. Shakespeare is considered the greatest writer in the English language to ever live. Everyone has probably encountered one of Shakespeare's plays somewhere. Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, King Lear, Hamlet. These are all incredible works of literature. But what if I told you there's not only one, but two other Shakespeare works? Ones we've never seen. Love's Labour's Won exists only as a title on a bookkeeper's record, but the record does suggest that it was a quarto, which means that it was written down. It's possible it's an alternative title for a known play. It is also possible that it's the sequel to Love's Labour's Lost. We truly don't know anything about this work other than its title, but my favorite theory is that it was so well loved that people read the copies they had into oblivion until nothing was left. The second lost Shakespeare play is maybe even more tragic. Cardenio was a play that was based on one of the greatest novels of all time, one of the best-selling books of all time, Don Quixote. Cardenio is a character from Don Quixote that is a madman living in the mountains, and this play is based on a scene from that. That's all I got. We know nothing else. But losing any of the bard's work is at least a 9 out of 10 on the devastation scale. And now we have come to what is quite possibly the most devastating loss to literature, Homer's Margites. And I put Homer in quotes because scholars aren't even sure if he actually existed or not. At any rate, he is credited with writing the Iliad and the Odyssey, which are the earliest surviving works of Greek literature, written all the way back in the 7th century BC. These books are among the most important in Western canon, inspiring everything from James Joyce's Ulysses to Madeline Miller's Circe. But before writing these epic tales, Homer had another story, a comedy called Margites. Margites followed a foolish man, a man so dumb that he didn't even know which parent gave birth to him. Plato said he knew many things, but he knew them badly. And Aristotle said that Margites was just as important to comedies as Iliad and Odyssey were to tragedies. In fact, it is possible that this story was the first comedy ever written. And as for all the things that could be built on top of it and works of art that could be created from it, I think it's a 10 out of 10 on the devastation scale. Let me know what other devastating losses there have been to literature down in the comments, and I'll catch you on the next one.